There's so many people out there saying like multifamily is the thing. This is your answer. That is totally fine. This is not a judgment call. This is not a morality thing. This is not even a monetary thing, because there are plenty of people who make it very wealthy.
Yeah, and I think it just creates a deeper level of trust. But let's talk about some of the challenges that we faced with our smaller assets that we own, right? We were discussing the other day, and it's not been a fun journey. I know, people look at stuff and they're like, oh, wow, we're going to just go and invest in real estate. But it's certainly not been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of hard work for both of us on our assets.
How many hours in the past 2 weeks alone have you spent driving to your small assets?
I drove 8 hours each way from New Jersey to Columbus and back last week, and then I drove again this week. Yeah. And I've done that several times. So it's not, and that's just the driving bit, right? Now people can say you can fly in, but then it's still time spent, and it's still time spent away from family. It's still time spent away from other things that you could be doing versus this, right? I remember I was away on a weekend when my family was home, setting up an Airbnb in Columbus, right? I was away from my family. I was away from my kids so that I could set that up, because that was the only time that I had to do that. And, it is certainly challenging. And because you're like the end all be all, nobody else is going to do that for you. You got to do it yourself, right?
And like you were saying earlier, this is your property and you're the one who's on the hook with your money. It's a different scenario than when it's a larger property where you have investors and you have partners, and the work that we do is not just for ourselves, but it is for the benefit of everyone. And we have an obligation and an opportunity to serve our partners and investors. So it is, again, it's I think that it brings a different value of your time, right? You're probably over there working on your little property and setting it up and whatever, kind of cursing the fact that like, oh, why am I away from my family? This is my time that I should be with them, versus when it's for something that like a bigger project we're working on. This is an amazing opportunity that we are creating wealth for our families, for our investors. And we are, again, kind of like you said, we're creating a bigger pie.
Right, and I think also the fact that if you're working on larger assets, you have to work as a team, right? And so the works get split up. It's not like I'm the only one going there. Well, it can be sometimes Drew going there, sometimes Andrea going there, sometimes I going there, and that kind of splits the work. Sometimes me going there, but it splits the work, and it gives you more flexibility to do other things.
And you have, ideally, like vendors and contractors are always going to be vendors and contractors. They are not your business. They are, they are contracted. But at this level, ideally, they are operating at a higher level than what you can get when you are dealing with small properties, where the margins for the people you are hiring are so much smaller and tighter. So if you are trying to renovate a house or a duplex or whatever, your contractor or your handyman or laborers or whoever you're bringing on to do the work are, definitely living paycheck by paycheck. Usually not, very coordinated on a business standpoint, let alone a scheduling standpoint. So one of the main challenges for me, and again, like as an out-of-state investor, I read David Green's long distance investing book, and I thought, I can do this. I'm going to get my core four, my realtor, my property manager, my contractor, and my inspector. I forget the fourth one. But I'm going to do this. I can, and you know what? If any one of those four pegs falls out, the whole thing collapses. And I never found good contractors. And I also had some challenges with property managers. And I was never able to get to that pace of scale and momentum that allowed me to focus on acquisitions. No, because I had to be day by day calling up my contractors. Give me an update. Why are you not getting back to me? This piece should have been done last week. Why are we still working on the bathroom? That is, and again, it's you're dealing with that on the scale of a single property that might net you $100 a month maybe, that is time better spent calling up a different contractor saying, hey, you're supposed to be done with units 1 through 20 this week, so that we can start getting those rented out while you're renovating the rest of the one, like something to that scale. It's just very, again, for me, about how you're spending your time. For me, I'd rather be spending my time at scale, so that the time that I have for me and my family is more impactful.
Well, I think it's not just that, right? It's also that at scale comes systems. That's the only way to scale. So when you're looking at these larger assets like we do, all of a sudden there are systems and processes in place for things to get done, even by these vendors, because now you're dealing with vendors who are working at that massive scale level, right? And so it's not about working with the smaller mom and pop shops to save $1 here, save $1 there. Just by the fact that they're working at that scale, it does bring the cost down a little bit. And, the most important thing is the timeliness of work that needs to be done. That being said, it's not that projects don't get delayed. I'm sure projects get delayed, especially the deep value add projects or ground up constructions with the permits and everything. But what we're kind of focusing on, it really helps us, and I could see that difference when we had the visit to Columbus together as a team. Right, we saw those, the larger property management firms, the way they operate, the way their meetings run, versus the smaller property management that we have interviewed in the past, to see how differently they're structured and how differently they function and how there's a clear chain of command. Versus, this is again not to say that mom and pop shops are bad. I'm not saying that. I think there is certain value to them. But again, it's the systems are not in place, and where you and I are in our lives, we need those systems. We need things to be optimized first so that we can get our time back.
And that for me was one of the most challenging things about working on smaller properties. And again, this is not a morality thing. This is not a value thing, like multifamily is better than small properties. It is a personality thing, because I know so many people who have become very successful acquiring and managing a portfolio of small properties. It works for them. They love being a solopreneur, doing it on their own, managing teams. They managed to find good contractors and all that stuff. Amazing, good for them. I will say, from my observations, most of them are kind of keeping everything up here. They might have some processes that have allowed them to operate like that, but those skills are not often, you can't lift and shift those into the acquisition and operation of multifamily, because it requires a different personality type, skill set, set of processes even. Not to mention just the basics of how the legal structure needs to be. What we need to have in place for multifamily is a set of defined operations with legal backing a lot of the time, right? For SEC compliance and things like that. You need to have your stuff together, because you can't just walk into a meeting with a broker and just start kind of fumbling around. They are going to sniff you out and end that meeting. You can do that when you're operating on smaller properties, and it's fine. And again, people are really successful and happy with their lives like that. For me, it was too unstructured. Everyone I was meeting, I'm coming in from a place of deep process and focus and structure, expecting a certain amount of action to be taken once we agree on something and I sign it to them. And I never got that back. And I get that working with you and Andrea and Brandy, and working with our property management team and working with our lawyers. It is just a higher level of professionalism. And so I think when people are talking about, should I go small property? Should I go multifamily? It is a personality decision based on doing some introspection and saying, what is your personality type? What do you bring to the table? And how would you rather spend your time? Because a lot of people, I will tell them like, hey, you know what? You could probably go pick up a couple duplexes and start doing really well at that, knowing you. For someone else, I'm going to tell them like, you know what? No, I think I think you need the structure of multifamily. Find good partners, start to put that together, and whichever one you choose, make sure you're pouring yourself into it.
And let's talk about our journey in terms of our learnings, right? I know that when you go online, you will see these ads for God knows how many people trying to teach multifamily. And we've been through a lot of the learnings, and we've had some awesome training on this, right? As a team, as individuals, as people who've come in and mentored us, right? They've poured into us. Let's talk about that journey, because I feel that it looks what it looks like on these ads and online. It looks a whole lot easier than it actually is to get into this. So what has your experience been with that?
When I was first getting into real estate and looking to buy a rental house, I had enough information to get that done within like a couple months. And I could have just, hit the ground running. I know people who within a couple of weeks of learning that real estate investing exists, they are under contract. That's cool. You can do that. You cannot do that here. This has been, for me, the difference in learning about real estate investing at a small scale, or a small property scale, I should say, versus multifamily. It's a different beast, and it is the difference between going to high school and going to grad school. This has been, I would say, for the past 2 years that I've been kind of researching this stuff, learning about it, and then working with you guys, has felt like legitimately being back in college. There's a whole separate vocabulary you need to learn. There is a way of presenting yourself. Again, those broker conversations are a little scary when you're a newbie. You have to practice, and you have to fail, and you have to bomb sometimes and get better at it. So it is certainly a different beast, but it is, if you're up for it, a challenge worth undertaking.
I remember we were having this conversation last year, right? We had, of course, the market had shifted, and we had this conversation. Man, we're getting frustrated. We don't have a deal under contract. What are we doing wrong here? And I think at that time, the decision was that we're probably not ready yet anyway to do this, right? Because we didn't have the stuff in place. And this kind of goes to show that it takes time to do large multifamily. It takes building a lot of relationships. And that takes time. It's very different from small multifamily, from single family. Now, that being said, if somebody's fully immersed into this space, right, or somebody tags along somebody else, on some other team, can you do it in a few months? Sure, you can. Absolutely, you can. But that's what we were doing, was kind of building this team organically from the ground up. Right, and that takes a lot of effort. That takes a lot of intention and energy. If you're going to buy in, if somebody were to start now in multifamily, what do you think your advice to them would be with respect to, what's the quickest way in your opinion to get started, and what's the best way in your opinion to get started?
Start the education immediately. That takes time. It does take time. Almost 2 years in, I'm still learning a ton, and I will continue to for years to come. So get that ball rolling, but then to immediately start showing up to meetups that are specifically for multifamily, and meet people. Try to find your partners, find people who share that vision, that drive, that skill set that fit your gaps, and that you can pour yourself back into as well. And I think that's the hardest part, is finding those great partners. When we were at RaiseFest in February, we met a ton of people who are probably just as educated as we are, but have not met someone they could actually work with. And that was, they were there to kind of raise money, but they were like, also, I just really need a partner. And I think, to the point of most of what we talked about today, like, that is the golden ticket right there. When you really find people with whom you can you build trust and operational excellence, that's how you get things done.
Yeah, I think a lot of times I've had conversations with people who want to start in multifamily, and they're like, "Oh, we want to start multifamily, and we would love to join your team." And my answer to them is, "No, hold on, you don't know what you don't know. Well, first find out what role you want to play in a team, right?" It starts there. It starts with what part of all of this gives you energy. It's not like I can do acquisitions and I can do capital raising and I can do post-acquisition asset management, I can do everything. Sure, you can do everything. Everything is a skill that you can learn. But what would you enjoy doing? And that's where the conversation starts. What would you do when things get hard, right? Like, what will not necessarily feel like a burden to you? And that's where the conversation starts. I remember having this conversation with somebody a little while ago, and she wanted to learn how to raise capital. And I was talking to her, and she mentioned to me that while she really enjoys underwriting, and the numbers just have to make sense, and that just gives her the most joy. And I was like, okay, capital raising is not that. Do you really want to do this? Versus do you want to do underwriting? It's like, that makes so much sense. I want to do underwriting. And so it really starts with what your personality is, what really makes you click. And once you understand that, from that you find other complementing skill sets or other people with complementing skill sets that can help you form a team. But if you want to get started faster, that's the organic way of doing it, right? Because finding the right partners who jive with your personality, of course, getting educated alongside, which is what we did, takes a long time. It took us a while to understand each other. It took us a while to form our buy box. It took us a while to form our vision, right? But if somebody's wanting to get started tomorrow, I think the easiest way is to actually find a team that already has a need and see if you can fulfill that need. If you're able to fulfill that need and there's already a team existing, then yes, you can immediately get started. But that doesn't mean that you don't have to get educated in that, right? You still need to learn from other people who are way more experienced than you are. And we're still learning. I'm still learning in this space, right? It's a constant process. It's just we continue to evolve, we continue to better ourselves when we continue to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a factor of just like any relationship, any business, anything you want to do in life, you have to understand your own strength and who you are first before you can start figuring out how you're going to work with other people, right? So that whatever that self-investment is and that introspection, I think is definitely step one. As soon as you start learning, start seeing how those pieces speak to you. Like you said, what actually excites you, motivates you, and then start investing more in that, and then start to show up in those meetings with other people and say, "Hey guys, I'm a pretty good underwriter. I think I could be great at asset management. I think whatever that thing is." Start putting that out there and getting conversations with other people who do it as well. Learn from the community. I will say, whether it's smaller properties, multifamily, wholesaling, whatever, getting into groups like Sub 2 or Vaynerjetty's group or any of the others that we are part of, for me has been fantastic, because the ability to meet people who are doing what you're doing or that you want to do has been so instructive to me. I probably started out going down some roads where I started meeting people who were doing that, and I was like, oh, on second thought, I don't like the way that your life looks. I'm going to shift a little bit. It's vital to have a good sense of who you are, what you bring to the table as the first step.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think when I joined Sub 2, I remember that a lot of the calls were kind of talking about a lot of the calls that were happening during the day were all about acquiring single family, acquiring them creatively, which made complete sense. But it didn't make sense for me. I was operating in a multifamily space, and for me to join those calls or to cold call potential sellers, it just did not make sense. It was not the highest and best use of my time, right? And so, but the beauty has been that I found you in Sub 2 and I found Andrea in Sub 2, right? And so it's being in these groups where you can find these like-minded individuals who are on a common mission really helps you grow faster. And I think that's the only way to grow, really.
Yeah. I'd say also, and not to be exclusive or exclusionary, but be careful with your time as well. It is really easy when you do join, some masterminds or communities or whatever, to get that shiny object syndrome, or just to get caught up in the excitement of, oh, there's another meetup, I should go to this. If you are really focused on multifamily, it's harder to find meetups specifically for that. And it's really easy to show up at just some real estate events where people are there to talk about everything. And then you get in these conversations about wholesaling and, RV parks and all this stuff that is fascinating and fun to talk with people. And I encourage that occasionally, but knowing that our time is limited and this is a very time intensive and education intensive asset class, try and just focus your time as much as possible on people who are in this space, meeting them, networking with them.
Awesome. This has been a fun conversation, Drew. What would you like to leave our listeners with?
Again, there's so many people out there saying like multifamily is the thing. This is your answer. It might be, but again, start with understanding who you are, because smaller properties, duplexes and single family might be your thing. That is totally fine. This is not a judgment call. This is not a morality thing. This is not even a monetary thing, because there are plenty of people who make it very wealthy with a different asset class, or even becoming wholesalers or running RV parks. Multifamily is a very specific beast, and knowing how to work within that is dependent on knowing who you are, what your values are, what your skill set is, and whether you like working with a team, and whether you're able to commit to that, and whether you can find great people who can then reinvest that back into you.
I couldn't agree more. And I think, I've always maintained that there's money to be made in every asset class, and there's money to be made like everywhere around you. There are a ton of business opportunities. It's just about where you focus, right? And so that being said, that's why I don't like to just focus just on multifamily. Yes, that's my focus right now. But will I be looking at other asset classes in the future? Yes, I will be, because I want to be diversified in other asset classes as well, because that is my investment philosophy, that I want to be diversified. And that's what I offer to my investors as well. As this is great. I will offer you great opportunities to invest in, but there are other asset classes also where great opportunities exist. And I encourage everybody to, be diversified in their investments.
And you want to master this one first, though, and get the processes laid out, get the operations running, so that your investors are confident in their investment, so that they are getting the returns that you promised, and that you yourself are supported by this business before you dive into that next thing.
Absolutely. I think that's what it is. The riches are in the niches. And so you got to focus on the one thing that's going to make the difference. Well, thank you so much, Drew, for joining me. This has been a real fun conversation, and I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Thanks so much, Avishkar. This was a great time.
Guys, if you haven't done already, please go check out my free video series on how to do due diligence on operators and on deals before investing in them. It's called Real Estate RX for Passive Investors, and it's available at www.rerxcourse.com.